Okay, hi everyone. Welcome. Great to have you joining us today. We've had 500 people register for this event, so this is really exciting. Just before we get started, a quick note: this session is being streamed live across LinkedIn, across AC Tech Futures YouTube channel, and on Instagram as well. So wherever you're joining from, welcome. If you need to drop off at any point or want to revisit anything, the session will be available afterwards on all those platforms, so you can catch up at your convenience. Today's session is focused on a challenge that I'm seeing across almost every architecture practice I speak to: knowledge management. But to be clear, this isn't about all architectural knowledge. This is specifically about applied design and construction knowledge. The kind of knowledge that should flow from concept through detailing into documentation and across teams, but often doesn't. Instead, it gets lost between project stages, buried in files, or held in individuals rather than systems. So what we're really discussing today is how knowledge moves or fails to move through the life cycle of a project. We're going to explore why this is happening, what the implications are, and more importantly, what can actually be done about it. You'll also see a QR code during the session later on that will allow you to download the white paper we're discussing today. We'll flag that clearly when we get to Yongjin's section, so keep an eye out for that and download it. That'd be great. In terms of format, we'll keep this practical and conversational. We're starting with a discussion between the panel, and then we'll move into a presentation of the DTO white paper and a quick live demo of their solution. And finally, we'll open up for questions from you, the audience. If you do have questions at any point, drop them into the chat or whichever platform you're using, because they'll come through, and I'll bring these into the discussion as we get to that stage at the end. Right, so let's get started by introducing today's speakers. Mary, please introduce yourself and you give us your role, company, and experience.
Sure, yeah. I'm Mary Roberts. I work for a company called CDH Partners in Atlanta, Georgia, and we focus mainly in healthcare, education, and worship spaces. But in my 12 years of experience, I've had more than just those three sectors. I've also done apartments, fire stations, lots of fun stuff. I feel like I've touched about every sector except for residential. And then in the past couple of years, I've become CDH Partners in-house BIM manager, and that is kind of my bread and butter right now, and I love it.
Excellent, thank you. Brad, please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for organizing a wonderful event, and it's really an important topic that we should be talking about, and I'm glad there's a platform to do so. So I'm Brad Prespo. I'm a senior design partner at Studio NYL, which is now a Lurch Bates company, where we focus on achieving aspirational design through building structures, exterior enclosure design, and vertical transportation, facade access, flow, basically all the building insights that are needed to create a successful piece of architecture.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Okay, Yongjin, do you want to go next?
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Yongjin. I am actually the practicing architect with about 25 years of the experience. And now I pivot my kind of career almost like 3.5 years ago. Now I am the CEO and a co-founder of the DTO.
Excellent. And Taylor, introduce yourself as well.
Howdy, everyone from Texas, stereotypical. Thanks, Alistair, for organizing this. I'm with DTO, currently acting as the implementation lead with a background in SaaS implementation, workflow consultation. Put simply, I basically work with individual firms to understand what it is that they're struggling with and kind of act as a go-between translator between the much smarter software engineers and try to basically provide solutions to those problems and then help the people in those firms to actually be able to take advantage of those solutions in a meaningful way. And thanks everyone for being here, and thank you, Alistair.
This is great. It's my pleasure. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. It's great to have you here. I'm really pleased about this and quite excited. So that's great. I want to start by framing this discussion properly. So some of these challenges are structural, some are cultural, and some are about how decisions are made and carried through projects. So I'm going to group them into a few key themes, and we'll try and get through all of them today, but I'm conscious of time. So number 1, we've got industry and process gaps. 2, firm culture and knowledge sharing. 3, decision-making and accountability. So Mary, I'm going to kick off with you. Why do you think knowledge is still so fragmented in architecture practices, despite all the tools that we have?
Oh, I think it's because all the tools we have and we really focus on, they're all meant for the end product, right? So they're all meant to, they all assume we have the base knowledge and the decisions already made in order to create our documentation and stuff like that. And very few things are focused for the architecture AEC industry in general in terms of knowledge sharing, I think.
And Brad, is that what you're seeing in your sort of experience as well?
Yeah, knowledge sharing is great, or knowledge management is desperately needed in the architecture industry. But we find ourselves in a highly nuanced profession where it takes decades just to build up a level of familiarity, experience, understanding, be able to see and go through the entire project lifecycle, not only from concept design, but all the way through CA and some post-occupancy evaluations, to provide feedback and lessons learned right back into the team. The other, I think, big culprit is that the project cycles are so long, so that if you're lucky enough to follow a project all the way through from conception through handoff to the client or owner group, you could be siloed in that little project world for several years at a time. And so there's just not enough opportunities at bat, if you will, as you are accumulating this vast experience and knowledge. So over the course of your life, if you follow that modality, you only have 6 to a dozen projects in a career that you're looking at.
Yeah, I was speaking to a practice yesterday, and we came up against the same thing. It was a workshop session where we were like, how do you manage knowledge? And they're like, we don't really. There's a load of stuff, and we know it exists, but we just don't know how to find it and action that, I think, across things. I mean, Yongjin, I'll be interested in your kind of perspective on this, because you've obviously built a kind of company to try and solve this problem.
Yeah, I totally agree with Brad and Mary too. But I think the key issue is that the architecture firm do not actually lack tools. We have the abundant tool. They lack continuity between the tools and the people and decisions. So a lot of the knowledge still lives in the fragmented places. It's like a PDF and email, or the project past project, maybe in the bin file. Very importantly, it actually in the heads of experienced architect. So the problem is not the access to the information in a general sense, but the problem is that the reasoning behind the decision is rarely the capture in the reusable and the trusted way. Yeah, that is my thought.
Yeah, and in terms of where, I'd be interested to know from both of you, Brad and Mary, where you see the biggest loss of knowledge happening, or where you perceive that happening. So concept, design, detailing, documentation, or handover, or all three potentially. Mary, I'm going to throw this at you.
Me first? Okay. I mean, I think most of it, well, I would think it would be all of them, honestly, but I think the most of it would be in the CA, construction, DD phases, because that's where you really get to know how things are put together, how things work, the whole process throughout giving this information to contractors and their subcontractors. And you really just learn from experience of through mistakes or great successes, or your manager's mistakes and successes. And I think it's all experiential knowledge. And concept design, that's like the one thing you get taught in school, but after that you're basically relying on who you're working around.
Yeah, I'm just going to add to that because we had this yesterday again, where because the way that teams are kind of put together now, people can be remote. You don't have that benefit of sitting next to someone all the time who is your team lead. Brad, have you seen this in practice?
Yeah, it's a disparate workplace environment these days. There's certainly silver lining behind the COVID cloud of being able to work from home more readily than before. I see my family a lot more than I used to, which is awesome. But it shattered the cohesive environment that teams or a pod of people sitting around together in the trenches working on a project. There's a lack of that kind of in-depth shared experience that team has, and a lack of cohesion. So now it's just, if you look at my calendar, I go from one Zoom meeting to the next, right? Back to back to back, and I'm talking with different people all over the place. So it's very difficult to develop those relationships, to be able to have that serendipitous kind of spontaneous conversation with teammates, to share knowledge, because if they're working on something and they don't have easy access to information like a neighbor or a trusted advisor or what have you, that question may not get asked. Where you could just like turn around and say, hey, Mary, what about this thing? And we could have a 5-minute conversation, and it would grow both of us.
Yeah, it's a good point. And also knowing those systems internally as well. So whether someone has started a practice and like, well, this is the way I did it in my last practice, and then someone else comes in and they're like, well, we did it slightly differently, and how that kind of structure is in place for a practice, I think is quite important.
Onboarding, especially with talent acquisition, is hard enough these days. The whole missing middle conversation and these sort of things. But having a way to onboard folks is really critical. So one of the things I used to do at a previous practice is that anytime someone came in and we'd start a CD phase or something like this, I would literally say, bring in your CD set. Bring in a couple examples of what you've done before, because that was the easiest way for me to go through, see what their experience was, see what they authored themselves, and be able to pinpoint, it's like, I like what you did here, however, we practice differently, right? Yeah. So it was not tutoring, but a shared dialogue based on where they came before and highlighting the differences. That was the quickest way I could find to onboard someone when starting a new CD set.
Yeah. Youngjin, did you want to jump in there as well?
Not this question, because I think that Taylor has something to share.
Yeah. So as the outsider here, the non-architect, something that I've kind of seen over time, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Brad, Mary, Youngjin, is knowledge seems to be focused as a proprietary asset within firms, and honestly within each architect's like own mind, and it seems to be guarded like, this is my treasure, not yours. And there seems to be a general reticence to actually naturally pass that along industry wide. Obviously, there are thought leaders in the space that love to go and they'll talk at the camera for hours like we're doing now. There are also the consultants that are happy to charge an exorbitant amount of fees to go and share brief little tidbits of knowledge without the contextually possible way of implementing it or taking it away from them. And in kind of an ever evolving like technology landscape, where with AI, with just so much knowledge actually existing, I'd kind of put forward a controversial take that knowledge itself should be shared much more broadly. But the real kind of, I don't know, finesse and the place where like any given architecture firm really can stand out is likely in the way that they're actually capable of distilling that knowledge into like packetized context specific areas to then share it at scale. Like, I think the future focus should actually be structured on getting that all together, ready to be shared. So then that way, instead of those 5-minute conversations, one-on-one mentors, which just doesn't scale in an ever-evolving world, it's more of, I can seek out that knowledge tied to where I actually need to use it And then I also feel comfortable and safe enough to actually ask for that deeper level. Like if I'm able to quickly access the what and the how, then I could go to someone like a Brad and dive deep with you on the why. And kind of you get excited because that's important to you and you get to share your passion. And it just kind of flips, I mean, my outsider perspective of seeing, I don't know, that tight grip on this like proprietary knowledge. Like it's going to hurt you if you share it with someone. So I know it's a slight difference in kind of the process gap, but I think until we actually address how we look at the knowledge, all of these other process gaps are going to have a hole underneath them.
Yeah. Alistair, if I can jump in here, I'd love to expand on Tyler's thoughts there. I'm a big educator. I think education is sort of second nature to how we practice at Studio NYL. And we always end our national conference speaking engagements with a little, I do at least, with a little diatribe regarding that exact point where the difference between different practices shouldn't be this gatekeeping of sacred knowledge about how buildings go together, right? Like that's the floor of a practicing architect, right? You go to a dentist or a doctor, you expect that you're going to get your teeth cleaned correctly, right? That's just a floor, right? You go to an architect, you expect things not to leak or fall down, what the case may be. But that seems to be somehow morphed into competitive advantage, which is not the case. The competitive advantage landscape should be how creative are you with this fund of knowledge that is baseline to the practice, and not gatekeeped.
I think that's a really important point. Actually, as a profession, we need to be better at this at that wider scale. Right? How do we share what we're doing to more people so that we're not repeating the same thing? I work with a lot of different practices where they're all in the same place, repeating the same stuff. And it's like, well, actually, we should overcome this by actually pooling that knowledge a bit better. And that works quite nicely with the next kind of sort of question is actually how firms are managing their knowledge internally in a way. So office standards, detail libraries, mentorship, which you've kind of talked about already, and informal knowledge sharing, or kind of QA, QC, kind of standing operating procedures and things like that. Do you think that they're effective, or are they starting to break down? Or, what is your thoughts around how we capture that knowledge within practices?
Let's say that seems like a Mary question.
Yeah. I mean, it's everywhere. It's like CDH has the knowledge in Teams, in one-on-one conversations, and Revit, and our folder structure. I mean, it's everywhere we think it would be most accessible or the most easy to get to, but that doesn't mean it's all in one place. And it's really hard to, I don't know, going backwards, like what Brad was saying with onboarding people. Onboarding people is almost the most important part, because you're trying to show them where everything is and how we do things and what the process is. And it's difficult when you have a lot of apps holding all this knowledge, and on top of that, you have to put that knowledge into those apps. It doesn't just magically appear there one day because you've emailed someone. I mean, maybe it will one day, but it doesn't today.
Yeah, it's got to be highly curated, and it's a very manual process, right?
Yes,
now.
Correct.
Yeah.
And office standards and detail libraries, that was a very big part of previous life of mine, and we always ran into the nuance issue where just because there's a standard drawing, right, and you can copy and paste it into whatever set that you're developing, but it's not truly plug and play. It's more like plug and pray. Pray that folks critically think about what they're grabbing from the resource and applying to their project. And it's not just blindly, okay, this is the template sheet, I gotta do all these things, and check mark, everything's done, right? To me, as someone who creates these standard stuff, that is like the worst case scenario, because you just propagated, you just added a bunch of information that may or may not be germane to solving the problem, and more likely than not, you've now created more problems for yourself once you actually the set's let and you start construction.
Hey, Brad, you said something kind of that jumped out to me there to Mary's earlier point. You used the word information, and obviously we're talking about knowledge sharing, and I think that there needs to be a much more clearer distinction between information sharing and knowledge sharing and what those actually mean. Because ultimately, I would say a standard detailed library, that's static, passive information that everyone can access, just like the internet is. I can go and search something, and now there's an AI summary tool that now it gives me more information when I'm searching that information. But there's really no knowledge or wisdom that's layered into that until I understand the context of where it's at. And so where I see the line, and I'd love to hear kind of Mary's take, making that transition from project architect to BIM manager, you had shared that like current tools and just kind of this whole BIM workflow idea operates as though the people already know that baseline knowledge, like that they already have it in the back of their mind. So then that way the context is baked in to the way these things are structured. But that, I mean, observably from my standpoint, that isn't the case. Like that's like making the argument that if you hand someone a hammer or you hand them a highly complicated piece of welding equipment, that they're going to be equally equipped to operate either one. Like, and that's not the reality. So from kind of the frame of what is information versus what is knowledge, how would you kind of lay out those distinctions when it comes to like, I don't know, maybe like the BIM maturity of CDH, or even just the way that BIM has like evolved, and even the past 5 years, or if you go back 10, 15 to the beginning when, Revit took over everything. I'd just love to hear how those kind of things go hand in hand.
I think that is a really interesting topic, and then I think that is a great kind of segue to the BIM, as actually is in relation to the knowledge sharing. We are working with the BIM almost like that more than the 8 hours a day, right? And then, but even though we have the advanced BIM tool, why the knowledge is still fragmented? I think that is really the critical question to everyone, especially the BIM manager or the leadership in the architecture firm. So I think so let me share my kind of 2 cents first. The BIM has transformed the practice in many positive ways, right? And then the BIM is really good at kind of organizing project informations and producing the deliverable. But what is actually less effective at is preserving the logic behind the decisions in a way that that can be governed and reused and trusted across the time. I think that is what Mary actually point out, and also the Brad echo, and then during the company detail library management. So in practice, in a lot of the valuable intelligence gets embedded inside the BIM model object, and the BIM family, and then also the deliverable or the project-specific workflow, but it remains tied to the project context. So it is not always separated into the reusable guidance for the wider practice for the whole the firm, the staff. So that actually caused few critical consequences. First, the team may reuse the model, as the word said, is just copy and paste without the fully understanding the assumption behind the project, the specific requirement. And then secondly, when project they are actually archived, the archiving the project, that is one of the kind of painful task of the BIM manager, But when project is archived, a lot of the embedded expertise and knowledge become effectively inaccessible. That is the problem.
Yeah.
So I would say the BIM improved the management of the output that the Mary actually the point out at the beginning of this conversation, that output, but it did not fully solve the continuity of the intent, design intent, and then the judgment and the validated knowledge. So, yep, that is my thought about the BIM.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's incredibly important because there's very boringly there's a liability and risk issue here. Is that if you don't capture those decision-making processes and something goes wrong, how can you then say, well, we followed a proper process, we made this decision because of this? You can kind of prove that out, and that's that's a liability. It's not particularly exciting, but it is something that we grapple with as architects every day. We have to be able to say why we've designed something in a certain way with certain parameters. And that needs some. I've worked in a practice where essentially all the door handles failed on a project, or they gave some of the staff RSI, so they then had to go back through all this data and work out why they'd made a decision to use that particular door handle. And they were able to prove it, but I think it was a very laborious process to kind of go, oh, actually, we have to get back through everyone's notes to find that. And this would have been 15 years ago or so. I suppose the open question here is, what are the real risks that if practices don't solve this with knowledge management, what are the problems that could occur? I mean, Mary, what are your thoughts around this?
I mean, I think it's just firms at this point, they have a baseline of knowledge, like Brad was saying, like we should all be able to do this baseline service and have this baseline knowledge. But every day we're teaching it to the next generation. Like every graduation year comes out in the summer and we're teaching it over and over again. And then they're teaching the next one. And then, I don't know, a new product comes out and we have to change our details and, edit our experience. And I think firms, we have to evolve to this new AI searchable agentic future where we put all of our knowledge in one bucket. Because I mean, today, even if in our 3 studios, someone in healthcare is doing like a metal sloped roof for the first time in 10 years. And whereas our worship team over here is doing them every day. But their overlap is minimal to none unless the right people are in the office at the same time. But if there's just this, knowledge hub, even personally, where we can be like in Georgia, the north part of Georgia in climate zone 7A, like what is our experience as a firm doing this metal sloped roof? And the faster we can also get through the data of how to put things together is going to ease up our time and allow us to design again. And I think that's going to be the future of what firms can offer to a client is, people management, getting their intent out of them and putting that into a realized space. And that's what we all got into this for, right? Because we're all artsy to begin with. We want to create something. And the easier it is to get through the details correctly and liability proof, it's going to open up time for the design.
Yeah, excellent point. Completely agree. Yeah, Brad, what do you think?
I think now is the only time in history where we have a technological convergence happening between digital, all the digital data and information that we create, and an agentic process that can begin to distill and synthesize that information, be trained on bespoke, project-specific or office-specific information that can form a resource, but also as an educator. So imagine, like every architect, instead of the conventional modality of one person curating an entire set of typical details and narratives and these sort of things, you invert that to have every person in your company has an agentic tutor that can be able to perform, 80%, create bespoke training guidelines and stuff specifically for you and where you are in your professional development, that is then overseen by a seasoned architect to make sure that there's no garbage in, garbage out type of thing happening. But what a paradigm shift that could be.
Yeah.
Well, and Brad, with that, like, I just kind of want to distill down what you said in the scope of what Mary said. To me, what I feel that's pointing to is, this agentic world and adaptive technology actually allows the architect, especially younger ones who are coming into it with, a natural proclivity for these tools, to actually get their own agency back to design. Like, interestingly enough, if so many people are worried about, oh no, agentic AI, it's taking it away from us and it's going away. I really think that it's actually the exact opposite. Like, it is allowing you to maintain agency over what it is that you actually got into the profession for. And even like, I know Mary quite well and have, seen her through this like process and gotten to observe. And even in the way that she's like implemented certain tools, it feels like the shift, it started as, and I've seen this in other firms as well that we've worked with, you get the agency from managing the BIM because you're just trying to gather all this stuff and put it in the right place and get it to the right people, and then go and you're you're like the teacher with the ruler smacking people's hands because you're using the like wrong thing, running around these classrooms and like all these different studios. To with some of this technology, I feel like that's that first major shift in a career, in an architectural firm's maturity, of then from managing the BIM into, I'm now a BIM manager and now I have agency to operate as this. These are our best practices. This is how we're going to access them. I don't know. I just never thought about the agents giving us agency before. And I'm not an architect, but I love watching y'all do what you do because it's cool. Like, I like going into beautiful buildings that don't fall on my head and they're going to be here long after I'm gone. So I don't know. I find this fascinating.
Yeah, I'm going to ask a kind of a more of a kind of final question because I want to move on to the demo part as well. But for Mary and Brad, just very quickly, if you could fix one thing tomorrow about how practices manage knowledge, what would it be? Mary, do you want to go first? Quite open question.
Sure. Tomorrow, I would just dive into an AI feature somehow. I would just dive in and just a cheap one. Don't spend too much investment on it, because I feel like every month is the right answer changes, right? When it comes to AI. But I just think if we are able to parse our knowledge and put it into one system that we can conversationally ask a question to, with knowing all of its limits, it's just going to make our work faster. And so the faster we can get correct data into it, the faster we can start using it.
Yeah. To piggyback on Mary's response, and something that I've advocated for in our practice is that we start teaching everybody effective prompt engineering, because again, garbage in, garbage out. So how do you effectively tap the resource that is the agentic systems that's been trained on your information and other resources, to be able to get information that you can begin to trust, because it's the whole deterministic versus probabilistic paradigm that we all need to get over. But if there's ways that you can parse questions into the system that increases the reliability of the response, I think that's the thing I would start with tomorrow.
Yeah, that's really good. And in all honesty, I could speak a lot more about this with both of you, but I want to keep us moving forward because of time. But I think that's set the scene really, really well. I'm going to move for DTO and the white paper that we've put together, and to explore this in a bit more depth. So I'm going to hand this over to Yongjin and Taylor to take us through this. I will share the QR code as well, and that will be ready for people to see. But yeah, I'll hand over to you both.
Okay, great. Thank you, Alistair. So DTO is the design intelligence platform. So our perspective, the problem is not simply that the firm need the better documentations, better construction details. Most firms already have plenty of the documentations, including the drawings, BIM model, standards, details, emails is markup, and precedent the project. But the real issue we see is that the most valuable part of the knowledge often does not survive in a usable way. So what gets lost in the is the reasoning behind all the decision and technical intent, and then behind the assembly selection, the constraint that shape the solution, and then the lessons learned during the project delivery. So when we talk about the knowledge continuity in the AEC industry, we are not just talking about the storing the storing the informations. We are talking about preserving design intelligence in a form that can be actually trusted, reused, and applied by the next team on the next project at the right moment. So this is where we think that this industry still has the major gap. So at DTO, our view is that the knowledge should be treated as the infrastructure for project delivery. So, which means you're capturing not only the what was done, but also why it is done like that. So, validating that the guidance and embedding all the intelligence directly into the workflow where all design decisions are made. So when knowledge is connected to the assemblies, design context, and the specifications, and then a performance intent, it becomes much more than the reference library. So we need to escape from the reference library. So it should become something team can actually use to make better decisions more consistently and across the project and across the multiple offices. So ultimately, our kind of perspective is knowledge continuity is no longer just the operational improvement. It is becoming the strategic architecture or AECO practice. So the firm that can retain and validate and reuse the design intelligence effectively will be the better positioned to deliver quality, consistency, and resiliency and performance over time. So that is the kind of the summary of the DTO's white paper. Okay, so let me share my screen. So, oh, by the way, I am not good at the multitasking. Now I am driving the mouse and then a Taylor.
Yeah, I'll do the talkie talk, Young Jin. I'm
yes.
Yeah.
Thank
if you share your screen, I'll add it to the stage.
Yes, thank you so much. So share.
Here we go. Okay.
Yeah, and so what everyone can see here, I'm assuming you're familiar with what's on the left there, everyone's favorite market dominant tool, Revit. And then, only one left. So we have DTO here on the right, so short for Design Together. We are a web-based platform, but we are also Autodesk Sustainability and Autodesk Technology partners. So for today, we'll show the plugin directly to Revit. Instead of doing like kind of your stereotypical software demonstration, what we actually figured we'd show is kind of basically a workflow analysis. It's a new one that we've started to consult on kind of across the country. And we call it designing forward. So this is kind of the process of, as you're working on projects, contributing back to your firm's kind of overall knowledge repository in a meaningful way. So we'll kind of show two different roles and how they'd interact with the DTO platform. Starting with this first one would actually be someone like a Young Jin, 20 plus year architect. Maybe he's been at this firm for about 6 months, but he has a whole bunch of background knowledge and expertise in a specific type of project. And so he's in the process of his detailing workflow. And so here he cuts into the call out view and he's ready to start detailing this. First thing that he's going to actually do within the DTO platform is create what's called the design session. And design session is basically DTO terminology for the toolbox to execute a detail. The way that our AI throughout this works is basically like a smart matchmaker, or if you think of like Clippy from the Microsoft Word days, looks like you're working on a resume. Here's kind of a format. Same basic concept, but for foundational building concepts. You'll see here the AI is making a recommendation based on what Young Jin actually has modeled within Revit. And then it's actually making recommendations on, hey, based on the geometry, based on some of the naming, based on actually some of the 3D elements in that model, this is the type of condition that it thinks you're working on, with the ultimate goal for it to provide that design session, which is that design toolkit to execute this detail. It's making a recommendation based on the actual assemblies within here. So it's reading actually into the model and making suggestions. And it's really cool when you get kind of past this initial like recommendation piece, because we are very human centric. We were founded by architects, so there's no desire for the AI to ever take over. Definitely want to stick to kind of our word on providing agency to the architects. Like at this point, the human can make any changes based off of the recommendations, because they ultimately know what they know. And in this context, Young Jin's a 20+ year architect. From here, we're going to go ahead and go into the actual design session to show what it's like to actually deliver information in a contextual way while you're doing the work. And this is kind of what we had alluded to earlier, that difference in just having information all over the place, kind of going through a fire hose at you. Now we went from the left, an LOD model about 100, to the right, a reference detail, actually peer reviewed by Studio NYL, to about LOD 350. So that's our first kind of view of, hey, this is a possible detail to fit this solution. As well as on the right there, you can see all of these design cards. And this is actually the what to the building site. So this is where we can actually dive in and we can get context specific information. So in that way, we can actually use that as powerful knowledge going forward and deploying into the how that we're actually going through and detailing out this process. And then from a pure workflow standpoint, if we're kind of past the point, since Young Jin in this instance is a 20+ year architect, I just want to get into the efficiency of how do I actually implement this knowledge in a meaningful way. So I'm actually going to go into my firm's proprietary knowledge base that they have, just specific example for the ADDD webinar. And I see two different vetted and approved options. So I'm going to go and have Young Jin click into one of them, because me as the senior architect, I want to review and see if this aligns with kind of my background knowledge and see if this is actually what I want to bring in. And I'm going to go and review what the firm has for me. This sometimes can be a QA/QC checklist. It can be a lessons learned. Like this is where we're really distilling down and scaling that knowledge that the rest of the firm has and making it accessible via the context of what I'm actually designing. And for this example, since we're highlighting kind of the design forward workflow, this is actually a scenario in which, because of Young Jin's expertise, he actually would look at this as like maybe a 50 to 60% of the way there detail, versus from his experience, he actually has much more of like an 80 to 90% of the way there that he actually wants to recommend to the content manager, the BIM manager, the project architect, saying, hey, I actually have a more preferred or better way to do this based on my experience. And so in keeping this all context specific, DTO has this button here called the contribute button. And so this is actually where, without a lot of technology knowledge, but all the technical knowledge, Young Jin can quickly click and the DTO platform will actually read everything that's going on in that detail view. And it's actually going to go ahead and pull that in basically as a suggestion to what you could think of as like your Reddit moderator, but your content manager within your firm, who's going to actually oversee what knowledge is meant to be disseminated to everyone across the board. And so at this point, the DTO platform picked up on all those individual BIM components. It picked up on the lines, it even picked up on his text note up top where he recommended this awesome solution. And then he's also able to distill down via this rich text editor tied to this context specific detail, all of the additional recommendations that he wants the firm to incorporate. So now, only being at the firm 6 months, within a matter of minutes, he's contributed something that he learned the hard way through bumps and bruises over 10, 20 years to the firm for them to be able to actually take that distilled knowledge and scale that across to the rest. And so now the back end, this is the point where the content manager would be able to move that into their QA/QC process live. So they would have received that while he's working on his project. He goes on to the next thing, and he gets to feel good, kind of a bit of gamification in there and contributing to the overall library. But then from a bigger picture standpoint, now that knowledge is accessible across the firm, across the offices. So to Mary's example earlier, the worship team's knowledge has made it across to, I believe it was the healthcare on the metal sloped roof, just live and in action while working, instead of what most firms right now, where they're having quarterly update meetings where they're putting this on a board and trying to then go back and put it in, just very much out of context. And then now kind of the other side of this coin is I actually want to kind of shift Young Jin's persona here to be much more of like, say, a junior architect, or maybe I'm 5 years in and I'm actually very familiar with our workflow processes and our tools and whatnot. And so I'm going to go into the detailing process. So I'm going to jump into a call out view on a different one. And I know, since I was onboarded relatively recently, the proper way that, Mary would have told me to go through and actually access the firm's vetted information. And I'm going to go and create a design session the same exact way. I'm going to link to that current view, and then I'm going to run the AI smart classification to, basically bring forward Clippy. Hey, what does the firm have to recommend tied to this information? And then also in the background, the way that projects are managed within DTO is the AI is already notified in project setup of what the climate zone is, the construction, the occupancy type, all of the relevant project information. So it's only providing relevant content in context for this. So I just went through the exact same workflow, and now I've arrived in my design session, which is going to be kind of the reference detail recommendation, all of those building science cards that I can engage with. I learned about all of this, and now I know the next step is I go to see what CDH or whatever firm, so in this instance, ADDD, has recommended for me. We don't have a detail for this condition. What do I do? Typically right now, this would be either a situation of panic, or I'm going down the Google rabbit hole, or maybe I'm like running around to offices trying to yank on the coattails of a senior architect saying, what next, what next, what next? Or in an ever-evolving workforce where people are all over the place, like Brad had mentioned earlier, I might just be kind of left out in the dust, and I might be tempted just to copy and paste. I know that there was this thing from this past project, but utilizing this kind of design forward workflow, I can actually, within the DTO platform, tied to all of this context, I can actually hit that same contribute button, and we're updating the text where it also says request information. And I'm actually going to go through that same process. And what's really cool about this here, and Young Jin, please pause when it goes right here, when I'm going to see, when I'm actually looking at a 3D view like this, it's actually going to ask me, hey, do you want to compress this 3D information down into a 2D referenceable material? It's basically going to convert this into a drafting view. So then that way my content manager can get this to the right person to provide a relevant drafting view to actually help me. And so we call this Smart Translate, but it's kind of an invisible AI working in the background. And so Young Jin, if you can, just go ahead and give that the okay. And it's going to go ahead and capture everything that's going on in that view. So then that way it's all context specific. Again, it has the project information. It now even has some of that 3D information compressed down into 2D relation. So then that way I can actually request help basically on this detail. And then at this point too, I can add in an additional PDF if I have something, or even a unique part of this workflow that we're starting to see usage is a contractor can actually upload a real construction photo via this same feature set into here. But for this instance, I'm asking for help. Hey, there is no detailed library, or hey, I have something that's 50% of the way there. Can you please provide feedback? And I'm going to go ahead and submit that request. And I'm going to be able to see via the review tab where my request is sitting, but then also at the same point, this goes live to my content manager. So then that way they can actually go in, look at this and be like, oh, okay, we either don't have a detail that fits this condition, or maybe we need to upload one from a past project, or maybe we need to put a senior architect on detailing out this condition. So it's a way of, basically sharing kind of the time of those senior architects without having to actively take their time. So instead of sitting down and spending hours doing this detail, holding the person's hand, they can actually go ahead and knock this out on their own. They can go ahead and use that same functionality to upload this detail back in and basically override the request on that information and basically update it to where, hey, here's now a great detailed solution. And then they have the option if they want to go and put this fully through a QA/QC process, or if this is a person who has the authority to update depending on user permissions, they can actually go and capture all of that componentized information, all of the text notes or keynotes that are in there, as well as Youngjin put that nice little red note up at the top. That's kind of his signature. And then what's great about this process as well is you can further down, you can have it highlighted by project, you can have it highlighted by office, you can have it highlighted by even the person who submitted and put this information in the library. And then you can see right there where it says general and general for climate zone and construction type. You can actually even say, hey, this is only applicable to these climate zones, so don't you dare use it anywhere else. And what's great about that is that makes it to where it's not even visible when your average member is using the platform in one of those other climate zones. So it's a great way to actively put that knowledge in place for the AI to actually make useful context-specific recommendations. And all of this is happening live, so multiple people can be working on it at any given point. And then now, I, as that junior architect, I submitted that, left work for the day, went and had some coffee with some friends. I come back the next morning, and Mary, being an effective BIM manager, made sure that was updated. I opened my design session, and Youngjin, we actually click the view fetcher. I want to show, this is one of my favorite things. Or go back into the design session.
Yeah. Okay. Let me publish this one first.
And so this is basically Mary went in and, fixed it and pushed that out, ready to go. And then now this is me back as the junior. I'm back in the next day, and I go in, I open up my design session in DTO. I can use DTO to actually take me where in my Revit model that I was at to reference this. And then now when I go to populate and look, okay, hey, I wonder if Mary updated my detail. Let's check. And oh, great, look, now I have a detail. And depending on, how the workflow structures or whatnot, that you can see how that was done in a matter of minutes. More stereotypical is the next day or, 3 days, depending on how efficacious your BIM manager review cycle is. But by bringing it all into one place and really actually empowering people to put the knowledge in at the time that it's used, that's really where I feel this workflow enhances information and turns it into knowledge, because it's deployable. It's workable, it's adaptable, it's something that you're going to continuously improve over time. So not every single person has to learn things the hard way. Like, not everyone needs to trip and scrape their ankle to know don't run downhill full speed. Like, just learn from the other people that have already kind of done it. And I think a broader approach from like an individual basis will really scale out to a firm. And then I think ultimately, I'm a dreamer, but industry-wide too. So yeah, that wraps the piece there. Youngjin, I know that's like our newest workflow. Is there anything that I missed or?
No, you missed nothing. Thank you. Thank you for thank you for helping me. And but if you don't mind, I actually add one more thing here. So I want to add something about the knowledge building the moment. So not just kind of a BIM tool and then even the DTO tool. We use the tool like ChatGPT or the Gemini in these days, right? And then we also even in within the DTO, we encourage our team member to use it internally too. And then but the risk is there. The risk is when we accept that output too passively. That is aligned with the Taylor's the previous comment. So without critical thinking, reflections, or active engagement, we actually weaken our ability to think creatively and solve a problem thoughtfully and the learn through this process. So this kind of the effect is it goes beyond AI, and it applies to any types of the software and the workflow or the tool we use in the practice, right? And then as we, Detail and I went through the briefly the workflow, I want to emphasize that if these moment of the knowledge buildings are processed passively, and this is like as the Brad point out, just copy and paste without understanding the rationale behind it. And if we continue, if we keep doing it, we may produce the output in the end, but not real understanding. And then without the understanding, we are not truly strengthening the practice. So what matters to the DTO is not just helping the user to get the answer just faster. It is helping them actually engage more meaningfully with the whole process, so that so knowledge is not just delivered, it is actually cultivated. So this is why our team, actually Juhan didn't join these kind of sessions, but especially our dev team is led by the Juhan, is constantly improving how DTO engage with the end user. And our North Star is to create the virtual mentor that is like the agent, right? And then that can collaborate with the user and throughout the workflow, and then provide the hands-on, just a step by step guidance. That is our North Star. Yeah, that is my kind of the closing comment.
Yeah, amazing, excellent, and everything you've just shown. As a young architect, I could have really done with that, because detailing wasn't my specialism. It wasn't something I was particularly good at. I'm probably not very good at it still. And having the ability to actually draw on that previous knowledge to help you augment what you're doing would have been incredibly helpful, I think. And then just what you're saying there, it's about understanding that, being able to communicate that to people who are starting practice, so they can understand how something is constructed, is so valuable. And it's so hard to gain that knowledge without actually learn by doing. I think being on site, seeing how they sequence things. So anything that supports that process is super valuable. I'm just going to show very quickly the report that we have put together, which is here. The QR code is at the top there. It's a really amazing report, obviously I would say that, but it is really interesting in terms of what we're trying to look at in terms of knowledge management, and looking at what DTO are creating, and some of the current issues in the industry that we talked about, today, about how you've got gap between different offices, different locations. So I would love people to download this and give us feedback on it. I think that would be really helpful. We'd love to get more feedback on that. I have got a few questions. We've got a couple of minutes to go, so we're going to do fairly quickly. But Booz has asked, do you think better ways of capturing and structuring knowledge, potentially through automation, could help retain expertise while helping designers focus on design? Mary, we did talk a little bit about this, but yeah, would you like to have a go at that?
I know I'm torn on this. I think it would help retain expertise, but I also think, like Yongjin was just saying, we need to keep the communication open face to face with each other throughout the generations of architects coming up. We need to be able to communicate with each other, to critically think. I just think the capturing and structuring knowledge gets us there faster, as long as you take into account all of the potential downfalls and the successes you'd see throughout using the automated knowledge.
Yeah, and I feel like there, if yes, and I think is the proper answer. It's yes, that automation is very valuable, and it can be usable if properly curated. Full automation, I personally think, is a horrible idea, because again, you're just getting tons and tons of information. Just like, think about how beautiful the internet and smartphones are. We're all Einstein in our pocket, but think about how people without curating it tend to live out, lives with arguing about things that aren't even relevant to the vast information they have. So I do really think that the curation layer of your management team, of your BIM managers, that's what actually gives that information value and turns it into knowledge that's applicable. So the organization piece and the suggestion piece is great of automation, but if you lean too far into it, now instead of a drought, you have a flood. Both end up bad for you. So it's a very fine line and kind of DTO's take.
This is an interesting question. What's the pricing? I'm not sure if you were able to communicate what that looks like.
I can. We do everything very transparently at a DTO. So straightforward month-to-month pricing. It's floating licenses at $125 per month. We do structured hands-on proof of concept periods before we would shift or even consider shifting into like a year-long arrangement. And it's at that point, then depending on firm size, there are basically bulk discounts. And so $125 per month is top of the line pricing, and it goes down from there as we work together and develop out that relationship.
A floating license, that sounds amazing. That's incredibly helpful. So it isn't, because there's with other products, they're just tying you into per user per month, and you're like, they're very rigid, but actually having a floating license gives you a lot of flexibility. So that's, welcome. Thank you for that. Okay, so we've got Katie's asked, been following your company for a while. When are you expanding into engineering, mechanical DB firm? DB?
I'll take that one too, Young Jin, so you don't have to hurt yourself. I also saw your other comment in there about happy to be a beta tester on it or something to that point. That's actually the process that we're in now. Is we have several customers that are full service firms, so they're starting with us on the architectural side, and we're actively working with them to better understand the methodology and the framework. So in that way, the AI agent that worked like Clippy, hey, here's a resume format, hey, here's a foundation detail. We want to understand how the engineering disciplines would find that information and the structuring and the curation of that knowledge to be beneficial. But we do have several design build firms on that they're really going into this direction with getting the contractors involved. So we're very much in the very open-minded phase, and we're taking on early customers in those disciplines to basically help us build out the more customized discipline-specific portion of the platform.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, incredible. That's really cool. Because you can start in this in architecture and moving across different disciplines quite easily, can't you? And the premise works across the different professions, essentially, doesn't it? Okay, we've got Juhan has said he's here, which is great. Which is good. We haven't got any other questions at all. So I think because we're going a little bit over, I might just finish up there. So I really appreciate
Hey, Alistair, I saw one in there that I just wanted to shout out earlier about someone had pointed out something about product reps.
Oh yes, I saw that. Yeah, that was earlier on. Yeah, hang on. Carry on.
If you can pull it on screen so that people could see it, because it was something about them being an underutilized resource, and I couldn't agree more. Your product reps and your contractors, those people who are actually in the field more often. We're missing kind of that end state piece and that end state layer. And that's one of the things that we're trying, but that's what actually originally inspired the whole contributor workflow and bring that in. And then actually our logo, the triangle, long-term design together's real, true, bigger picture is actually to bring the contractor, manufacturer, and design disciplines all together. And I just really appreciated Kristen's point there, because I think you could fill in the blank where it says product reps are an underutilized resource with BIM managers are an underutilized resource. Project architects are an underutilized resource. Junior architects, even with their knowledge and willingness to try new tools, are an underutilized resource. And I just really think the people component is something that is also very, very important to this conversation. And as we get more in the weeds of tech, we shouldn't forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Let me just take that. I found a comment. Let me just get rid of that. Okay. Right. Thank you very much. I think we're going to wrap up there. First of all, a big thank you to all of the speakers for sharing their insights. Would have liked to have talked a lot longer, to be honest, around this. So thank you very much for that. Thanks to everyone who's joined us live across LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram, and for all the questions and the engagement. We have loads of comments. If you want to check them out on LinkedIn, you'll be able to see them. If you haven't downloaded the white paper, please use the QR code. It goes into much more depth on everything we've discussed today, and it allows you to reach out to DTO and find out more. As mentioned in the session, will be available to watch back if you'd like to revisit any part of it and share it with your team. It will be on YouTube. Particularly, I've shared that in the link. I think this has been a really incredible conversation. I really appreciate everyone's time, and we are moving beyond these kind of tools and focusing more on knowledge and how this flows through project teams and over time. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll see you in the next session, which will be 2 weeks' time, I think. But I will, reach out to everyone then. But I appreciate your time, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.